I remember the exact moment my world started to crack. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the kind where the sky hangs low and heavy, pressing down on everything below. I was sitting at our kitchen table, the one with the scratches from years of family meals, sipping lukewarm coffee from my favorite mug, the one with the faded flowers that my daughter had painted for me back in elementary school. The house was quiet. Too quiet, with the kids off at college and my husband, Robert, still at work, or so I thought. I had pulled up our online banking app on my laptop just to check the balances like I did every month. Nothing out of the ordinary, or so I believed. But as I scrolled through the transactions, something caught my eye. A charge for $150 at a jewelry store downtown, then another for $200 at a fancy lingerie boutique I'd never heard of. My heart skipped a beat, not in excitement, but in that uneasy way when you sense something's off. Robert wasn't the type for surprises, not anymore, not after 25 years of marriage. Our anniversaries were marked by practical gifts, like a new blender or tickets to a local play. These felt secretive, indulgent, wrong. I stared at the screen, the rain pattering against the window like tiny accusations. Maybe it's for me, I whispered to myself, trying to push down the knot forming in my stomach. But our anniversary was months away, and Christmas had passed. I closed the laptop, stood up, and paced the kitchen, the linoleum cool under my bare feet. The smell of the morning's bacon still lingered in the air, a reminder of the breakfast I'd made for him before he left, kissing my forehead as he always did. "Love you, hun," he'd say, his voice steady, his eyes meeting mine without a flicker. That was the hook that snagged me, the beginning of the unraveling. But to understand how deep the betrayal went, I need to take you back to how things were before. Our life wasn't perfect, but it was ours, built brick by brick over the years. Robert and I met in college, back when we were both wide-eyed and full of dreams. He was studying engineering, always tinkering with gadgets in his dorm room, and I was pursuing nursing, drawn to the idea of healing people. We fell in love over late-night study sessions and cheap pizza, promising each other a future filled with stability and family. We married young, right after graduation, and settled in this cozy suburb outside Chicago. Our home was a modest 2-story with a wraparound porch, the kind where neighbors waved and kids played in the streets until dusk. For years, our routine was comforting, like a well-worn blanket. I'd work shifts at the hospital, coming home with stories of patients who touched my heart, the elderly man who reminded me of my father, or the new mother beaming with joy. Robert climbed the ladder at his engineering firm, designing bridges and buildings that dotted the city skyline. He was proud of his work, often showing me blueprints over dinner, his eyes lighting up as he explained the intricacies. We had 2 children, Emily, our firstborn, now 23 and studying law in Boston, and Michael, 21, pursuing art in New York. They were the light of our lives, filling the house with laughter and chaos. Family dinners were sacred, roast chicken on Sundays with mashed potatoes whipped just right, the steam rising like a warm hug. Robert would carve the meat, his hands steady and sure, while I poured the gravy, our fingers brushing in that familiar way. Money was never a big issue. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. We had a joint account for household expenses and separate ones for personal spending, his for tools and golf outings, mine for books and the occasional spa day with friends. We trusted each other implicitly, or at least I trusted him. I'd handle the bills most months, logging in to pay the mortgage, utilities, and credit cards. It was my way of contributing, keeping our ship steady. Socially, we were that couple everyone envied a little. Church on Sundays, where Robert volunteered as an usher, handing out bulletins with a warm smile. Barbecues with neighbors, where I'd bring my famous potato salad, the one with just a hint of dill. Our friends, like Sarah and Tom from down the street, would joke about how solid we were. "You two are the rock," Sarah once said, clinking her glass against mine at a backyard party, the fireflies dancing in the twilight. But looking back, there were tiny fissures I ignored. Robert started working later hours about a year ago, blaming it on a big project, a new bridge over the river. He'd come home exhausted, collapsing into his recliner with a sigh, the leather creaking under his weight. "Tough day," he'd mutter, his voice laced with fatigue. I'd rub his shoulders, feeling the knots under my fingers, and he'd lean back, his eyes closing in relief. Our intimacy had waned, but I chalked it up to age, to the empty nest. We were in our late 40s after all. Life changes. I filled my days with volunteer work at the local shelter, helping women get back on their feet after tough times. It gave me purpose, hearing their stories of resilience. Little did I know I'd soon be drawing from that well myself. That rainy afternoon, after spotting those charges, I tried to shake it off. I busied myself in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for soup, the knife's rhythmic thud against the cutting board grounding me. But the doubt lingered, like a shadow in the corner of the room. When Robert came home that evening, his coat dripping from the rain, he kissed my cheek as usual. "Smells good in here," he said, hanging his keys on the hook by the door. We ate dinner in front of the TV, some mindless show playing in the background. I watched him out of the corner of my eye, noting how he avoided my gaze just a fraction longer than usual. "Everything okay at work?" I asked, my voice casual, stirring my soup. "Yeah, fine," he replied, a bit too quickly, his spoon clinking against the bowl. That was the first clue, subtle as a whisper. But suspicions have a way of growing, don't they? Like weeds in a garden you thought was pristine. Over the next few weeks, the oddities piled up. Another charge appeared, a hotel room for one night midweek in the city. Robert had told me he was at a late meeting that day, coming home around midnight with the scent of rain and something else. Perfume? I dismissed it at first, telling myself it was from a colleague, but sleep evaded me that night. The sheets tangled around my legs as I lay awake, listening to his even breathing beside me. Then there were the phone calls. He'd step outside to take them, his voice muffled through the glass door, laughing in a way that sounded too intimate, too light for work talk. I'd press my ear to the window once, catching fragments. "Can't wait. Yes, soon." My heart pounded, a cold sweat breaking on my skin. I started paying closer attention to the bank statements, printing them out and hiding them in my nightstand drawer under a stack of old letters from the kids. Each new transaction was a puzzle piece: flowers from a boutique florist, dinners at upscale restaurants we'd never visited together. The amounts weren't huge, but they added up, chipping away at our shared savings. I didn't confront him right away. No, that would have been too hasty, too unlike me. Instead, I let the suspicions simmer, watching him like a hawk watches its prey from afar. Every morning as he sipped his coffee, black, 2 sugars, I'd study his face, searching for cracks in the facade. His smile was the same, warm and crinkled at the edges, but now it felt rehearsed, like an actor hitting his mark. One evening, about a week after that first bank statement, I pretended to be engrossed in a book while he worked on his laptop in the living room. The lamp cast a soft glow, highlighting the lines on his forehead as he typed. His phone buzzed on the coffee table, and he glanced at it quickly, too quickly, before flipping it face down. "Who was that?" I asked lightly, turning a page I hadn't read. "Just work," he said, not looking up. "Deadline stuff." But I saw the way his thumb hovered over the screen before he set it aside, a hesitation that spoke volumes. That night, as we lay in bed, the ceiling fan whirring softly above us, I waited until his breathing deepened into sleep. Then, heart pounding, I slipped out from under the covers, my feet silent on the carpet. His phone was on the nightstand, charging. I knew his passcode, our wedding anniversary. With trembling fingers, I unlocked it. The messages were there, buried in a thread with a contact labeled Project Lead, Karen. But the words weren't about bridges or blueprints. "Missed you today," one said, sent that afternoon. "Can't wait for our lunch tomorrow." His replies were affectionate, laced with emojis I hadn't seen from him in years. A heart, a kiss. There were photos, too. A woman, younger, with auburn hair and a smile that lit up the screen. They were at a cafe, her hand on his arm, the city skyline in the background. I felt the air leave my lungs, a sharp pain twisting in my chest. I set the phone down carefully, as if it might explode, and retreated to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. The mirror showed a woman I barely recognized, eyes wide, face pale under the harsh fluorescent light. Tears came then, silent and hot, streaming down my cheeks. How long? Why? The questions swirled like a storm. The next day, I called in sick to the hospital, my voice steady over the phone despite the turmoil inside. Robert left for work with his usual kiss, oblivious or pretending to be. I spent the morning digging deeper. I logged into our bank accounts again, cross-referencing dates with the messages. The jewelry charge matched a day he'd worked late. The hotel, a conference he'd mentioned vaguely. It all fit, a puzzle I wished I could unsee. But knowledge is a double-edged sword. With each discovery, the betrayal sank deeper, like roots into soil. I thought of our vows, spoken in a sunlit church all those years ago, surrounded by family. For better or for worse, we'd promised. This was the worse, raw and unrelenting. I needed more proof, something irrefutable, so I started following the trail. I drove to the jewelry store downtown, the one from the statement. The bell tinkled as I entered, the air scented with polish and promise. A young clerk smiled at me. "Can I help you?" "I'm inquiring about a purchase," I said, showing the transaction details on my phone. "It was a gift, but I'm not sure if it's the right size." She checked her records, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "Ah, yes, a necklace, gold chain with a heart pendant, engraved with Always, K, purchased by Mr. Robert Ellis." My stomach dropped. K for Karen, not for me. My name is Laura. I thanked her, bought a cheap pair of earrings to keep up appearances, and left, the bag crumpled in my fist. From there, it snowballed. I found receipts in his car glove compartment, dinner for two at a romantic Italian place, wine stains on the paper. I even tailed him one lunch hour, parking across from his office building. Sure enough, he met her. Karen, stepping out of a cab in a red coat, her laugh carrying across the street as he embraced. They walked arm in arm into a bistro, disappearing behind frosted glass. By then, the shock had numbed into a cold resolve. I wasn't just hurt, I was furious. This wasn't a fling, it was a double life, funded by our shared money, our future. The account we'd built for retirement, for visits to the kids, for that dream trip to Europe we talked about. He was siphoning it away, drop by drop. That evening, as he hummed in the shower, the steam fogging the mirror, I sat at my desk in the study. I opened our banking app again, my cursor hovering over the transfer option. Our joint account had over $50,000, savings from years of scrimping. Legally, it was half mine, but in that moment, it felt like justice. I created a new account in my name only, at a different bank. It took minutes online, my hands steady now. Then I transferred half the balance to it, $25,000, watching the confirmation pop up like a victory flag. It was legal. We were married, no separation yet, but it was my safety net, my first act of reclaiming control. When he emerged from the bathroom, towel around his waist, I was back in the kitchen stirring pasta sauce as if nothing had changed. "Dinner's almost ready," I said, my voice even. He nodded, oblivious, and we ate in silence, the clink of forks echoing in the growing chasm between us. The discovery phase bled into planning. I couldn't let this destroy me. I'd seen too many women at the shelter, broken by betrayal, starting over with nothing. I wouldn't be one of them. First, I consulted a lawyer discreetly. I met her in a quiet cafe across town, the aroma of fresh coffee grounding me as I laid out the evidence, printed statements, screenshots of messages, even a photo I'd snapped of them together. Her name was Miss Harlan, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense, her notebook filling with notes. "You have a strong case," she said, sipping her latte. "Illinois is a no-fault state, but with infidelity and financial misconduct, we can push for a favorable division. The transfer you made, smart. It's community property, but document everything." I nodded, the weight lifting slightly. I want it done quickly, cleanly. She outlined the steps: gather more asset info, file for divorce, serve papers. It sounded clinical, but inside it was a storm. Next, I secured my own finances. I opened credit cards in my name, transferred utilities to separate billing where possible. I even spoke to our kids over video calls, keeping it vague at first. Dad and I are having some issues, I told Emily, her face pixelated on the screen, concern etching her features. Mom, what happened? She asked, her voice soft. I'll explain soon, I promised, not wanting to poison them against him yet. Michael was similar, his artistic soul sensing the pain. We're here for you, he said. With the pieces in place, I waited for the right moment. It came on a Friday evening, the house filled with the aroma of lasagna baking in the oven, his favorite. I'd planned it that way, a last supper of sorts, though he didn't know it. As we sat at the table, the candles flickering softly, casting shadows on the walls, I pushed my plate away. Robert, I said, my voice calm, though my heart raced like a trapped bird. We need to talk. He looked up, fork midway to his mouth, a flicker of unease in his eyes. What's wrong, Laura? You seem off. I pulled out the folder I'd prepared, printouts of bank statements, highlighted charges, screenshots of messages, even the jewelry receipt. I laid them out like cards in a game, one by one. These. Explain these. His face drained of color, the fork clattering to the plate. He stared at the papers, his hands trembling slightly as he picked one up. This isn't what it looks like. Isn't it? I kept my tone even, drawing on every ounce of strength from my nursing days when I'd comfort patients through their worst moments. Karen, the gifts, the hotel, the lunches. How long, Robert? He slumped back in his chair, the wood creaking under the shift. A year, maybe more. It started as, I don't know, stress from work. She listened. But Laura, I love you. This was a mistake. A mistake? The word tasted bitter. Mistakes are forgetting an anniversary. This is betrayal. You used our money, our future for her. Tears welled in his eyes, but I felt no pity, only a hollow ache. I'm sorry. I'll end it. We can fix this. No, I said softly, standing up. We can't. I've already seen a lawyer. Papers will be served next week. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away, the touch that once comforted now repelling. Please, think about the kids, our life. I have. That's why I'm doing this. I left him there, the lasagna cooling untouched, and retreated to the guest room, locking the door. That night, sobs racked my body, muffled into the pillow, but by morning, resolve had hardened like steel. The confrontation was just the spark. The fire spread quickly. Over the weekend, I packed a bag and stayed with Sarah, our neighbor. She didn't pry at first, just offered tea and a listening ear, the steam curling up from the mugs like unspoken questions. When I told her, her face softened with sympathy. Oh, Laura, I'm so sorry. Word trickled out, as it does in close-knit communities. By Monday, when the divorce papers were served at his office, Miss Harlan had arranged it discreetly. Whispers had begun. His colleagues, the ones he'd golfed with, shot him sideline glances. Karen, I learned later, was a junior engineer at the firm, which explained the project excuses. The kids were next. I called them together on a video chat, the screen splitting their worried faces. Your father and I are separating, I said, keeping it factual. He's been unfaithful. Emily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Mom, no. Are you okay? Michael's eyes narrowed. Dad? How could he? I explained the basics, sparing the gory details, emphasizing that this wasn't their fault. We'll get through this as a family. They flew home the next weekend, enveloping me in hugs that smelled of airplane and youth. Robert tried to join us for dinner, but the tension was palpable, forks scraping plates and awkward silence. You hurt her, Emily said finally, her voice sharp. How do we trust you now? He hung his head, murmuring apologies, but the damage was done. The kids sided with me, not out of spite, but because truth has a way of aligning loyalties. As the divorce proceedings unfolded, the financial betrayal came to light in court. Miss Harlan presented the evidence meticulously, the statements showing thousands diverted to her affair. Robert's lawyer argued it was joint spending, but the judge, a stern woman with glasses perched on her nose, wasn't swayed. This constitutes marital misconduct, she ruled, her gavel echoing like finality. He lost more than half the assets. The house went to me. He moved into a small apartment downtown. The savings I'd transferred deemed prudent, not theft. Karen ended things soon after, or so rumor had it. Office gossip reached me through mutual friends. She transferred departments, her career stalled by the scandal. The community reaction was mixed, as these things are. At church, some offered prayers and casseroles, their hugs warm and genuine. Others whispered behind hands, speculating on what I'd done to drive him away. But I held my head high, volunteering more at the shelter, channeling my pain into helping others. "You're strong," one woman there told me, her eyes mirroring my own past hurt. "You'll rebuild." And I rebuilt. With the settlement money, I remodeled the kitchen, new counters where no memories lingered. I took a trip to visit Emily, walking Boston streets, the crisp air clearing my mind. Michael sent artwork, vibrant pieces that brightened the walls. Months passed, the divorce finalized in a quiet courtroom, papers signed with steady hands. Robert and I communicated through lawyers at first, then tentatively for the kids' sake. He sought therapy, admitting his faults in a letter that arrived one rainy day, much like the one where it all began. "I was wrong," he wrote, the ink slightly smudged. "I hope you find happiness." I did. Not in revenge, though draining that account had been a quiet triumph, but in rediscovering myself. I started dating again, cautiously, a kind widower from church, his laugh genuine, his touches respectful. Healing didn't come overnight. It was a slow thaw, like spring after a harsh winter. I threw myself into new routines, ones that didn't echo with his absence. Mornings started with yoga in the living room, the mat unrolling with a soft thud, my breath sinking with the rising sun filtering through the curtains. The stretch in my muscles mirrored the one in my heart, pulling, aching, but strengthening. At the shelter, my volunteer shifts became longer, more meaningful. I'd sit with women whose stories mirrored mine in fragments, betrayed trusts, shattered homes. One, Maria, a quiet soul with calloused hands from years of factory work, shared how her husband had gambled away their savings. "I felt like nothing," she whispered over herbal tea, the steam carrying the scent of chamomile. "But you took action. That's power." Her words stuck with me, a balm on old wounds. I shared my story in bits, not for pity, but for connection. "It's not about revenge," I'd say, stirring sugar into my cup, the spoon tinkling softly. "It's about reclaiming what's yours, your peace, your future." The kids visited more often, bridging the gap. Emily helped me redecorate, painting the bedroom a soft blue, the rollers swishing across the walls like waves erasing footprints in sand. "This is your space now, Mom," she said, paint flecking her hair. Michael cooked dinners, his artistic flair turning simple meals into feasts, pasta with fresh herbs from the garden I'd started tending again. Robert and I navigated co-parenting with cautious civility. We'd meet at neutral spots like the park near the house, benches worn from years of watchers. "How are you?" he'd asked, his voice tentative, hands clasped in his lap. "Better," I'd reply, honestly, no malice, just truth. He paid child support promptly, attended therapy sessions he mentioned in passing. Once he admitted over coffee, the bitter brew matching the moment, "I was lost, Laura. Midlife crisis, they call it, but that's no excuse." "No," I agreed, stirring my cup, the swirl mirroring my thoughts. "It's not." Forgiveness crept in slowly, not full absolution, but enough to let go of the anger that had weighed me down. Financially, I flourished. The transferred funds seeded investments, advised by a financial planner Sarah recommended, stocks in stable companies, a small rental property on the edge of town. I watched the balances grow, numbers on a screen that represented independence. No more joint accounts, no shared vulnerabilities. Socially, life bloomed anew. The widower, John, became a steady presence. Our first date was simple, a walk in the botanical gardens, the air thick with floral scents, bees humming lazily. He listened to my story without judgment, his hand gentle on mine. "You've got a quiet strength," he said, his eyes kind under the brim of his hat. We shared laughs over shared meals, his cooking rivaling mine, steaks grilled to perfection, the sizzle a symphony. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in oranges and pinks, I sat on the porch swing, the chains creaking rhythmically, the neighborhood sounds, kids laughing, a dog barking, wrapped around me like a familiar shawl. I thought back to that rainy day, the bank statements that had shattered the illusion. It hurt, yes, but it had also set me free. The moral of it all? Trust is fragile, but so is deceit. It crumbles under light. I learned that justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet transfer, a signed paper, a step forward. And in the end, empowerment comes from within, not from what others take, but what you build anew. Now, as I wrap up this tale, I wonder, would you have spotted those charges sooner, or waited like I did, gathering strength in the shadows? Life's full of these moments, isn't it? The ones that test us, shape us. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button, subscribe for more real-life reflections, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever faced a betrayal that led to your own rebirth? I'd love to hear. As the seasons turned, so did the pages of my life. Winter's chill gave way to spring's tentative blooms, much like the hope that sprouted in my chest after the storm of betrayal. I found myself walking more along the winding paths of the nearby park, where the gravel crunched under my sneakers and the air carried the fresh scent of budding leaves. Each step was a declaration of independence, a rhythm that echoed my heartbeat, steady, resilient. John became a gentle constant in this new chapter. Our dates evolved from walks to quiet evenings at home, where he'd bring over ingredients for a meal we'd cook together. The sizzle of onions in the pan, the steam rising with garlic's pungent aroma, filled the kitchen with life again. "You're a natural," he'd say, his voice warm as he handed me a glass of wine, our fingers brushing in a way that sent a soft spark through me. It wasn't the fiery passion of youth, but a comfortable glow, like embers that promised warmth without the risk of burn. One afternoon, as we sat on the porch with coffee mugs steaming in the cool air, I opened up more about the past. "It wasn't just the affair," I confided, watching a squirrel scamper across the lawn. "It was the lies, the money he siphoned away. I felt so foolish." John nodded, his hand covering mine, rough from years of carpentry work. "You weren't foolish, Laura. You trusted. That's strength, not weakness." His words lingered, helping me reframe the narrative I'd told myself in those dark nights. The kids played a pivotal role in my healing, too. Emily came home for a long weekend, her suitcase thumping down in the hallway as she hugged me tightly. We spent hours in the garden planting flowers, tulips and daffodils, their bulbs firm in my palm before nestling into the soil. "This is for new beginnings," she said, dirt smudging her cheeks, her smile mirroring mine from younger days. We talked about her studies, her dreams, and inevitably about Robert. "He's trying, Mom, but I'm proud of you for standing up." Michael joined us via video calls, sharing his latest sketches, inspired by my story, he said. One was an abstract piece of a phoenix rising, colors swirling in fiery reds and calming blues. "That's you," he told me, his voice crackling slightly over the connection. It hung now on my wall, a daily reminder of transformation. Financially, the empowerment grew roots. I attended workshops at the local community center, learning about investments and budgeting. The room smelled of fresh coffee and determination, filled with women like me, notebooks open, pens scratching. "Compound interest is your friend," the instructor said, her voice confident as she pointed to charts on the projector. I applied it diligently, watching my accounts flourish. The $25,000 I'd secured became $30,000, then more, a testament to patience and prudence. There were setbacks, of course. A lonely night here, a memory triggered by a song on the radio, our wedding tune playing softly as I drove home from work, the notes twisting the knife anew. I'd pull over, tears blurring the dashboard lights, allowing the grief its moment before wiping my face and continuing on. Robert and I had our first real post-divorce conversation at Emily's graduation. The auditorium buzzed with excitement, caps tossing like confetti in the air. He approached me afterward, suit slightly rumpled, a tentative smile on his face. "She did great," he said, his hands in his pockets. Yes, she did. We stood there, the crowd milling around us, scents of flowers from bouquets mingling with the polished wood of the hall. "I'm seeing someone, a therapist," he added quietly, "working on myself." I nodded, no anger left, just a quiet acknowledgement. Good, for you and the kids. It wasn't forgiveness in full, but a bridge mended enough to cross when needed. Through it all, the shelter became my anchor. I led a support group now, sharing stories in a circle of folding chairs, the room lit by soft lamps that cast gentle shadows. Betrayal hurts, but it doesn't define you. What you do next does. The women nodded, some with tears, others with budding resolve. Maria, from earlier, graduated from the program, hugging me tightly on her last day. "You saved me," she whispered. "Did I? Or did you save yourself?" I replied, feeling the truth of it in my bones. As summer arrived with its long days and humming cicadas, I took that dream trip to Europe, alone at first, but John joined for part of it. Walking cobblestone streets in Paris, the Eiffel Tower glittering at night, the air alive with laughter and accordion music. I bought a necklace for myself, simple silver, engraving it with resilient. It dangled against my skin, a cool reminder of the path walked. Looking back, the betrayal was a catalyst, painful but necessary. It stripped away illusions, revealing my own strength. Karma, or justice, whatever you call it, played its part. Robert's life stabilized, but without the extravagance his secrets afforded. And me? I thrived, not in spite of it, but because I chose to. My story didn't end with a triumphant roar, but with a quiet, unshakable peace, the kind that settles in your bones and makes you feel whole, not in spite of the cracks, but because of how you filled them with gold. It's been 2 years now since the divorce was finalized. The house, once a testament to us, is now undeniably mine. The front door is painted a cheerful sage green, a color Robert would have deemed too bold. The garden I tended with Emily flourishes, a riot of color that attracts butterflies and the admiration of neighbors. On quiet evenings, I sit on the porch swing with a book, the rhythmic creak of the chains a soothing soundtrack to my contentment. The scent of lavender from the bushes I planted drifts on the breeze, masking even the memory of that rainy Tuesday's despair. My relationship with John has deepened into a gentle, respectful partnership. We don't live together. We both cherish our hard-won independence too much. But we share keys to each other's homes, and his toothbrush has a permanent spot in my bathroom. He fixed the loose step on my porch last weekend, the sound of his hammer, steady, competent, filling the air. As he worked, I brought him lemonade, noticing the way the sunlight caught the silver in his hair. "Thank you," I said. And he looked up, his smile reaching his eyes in a way that felt completely genuine. "Anything for you, Laura. It's a love built on transparency, on histories shared and respected, not hidden." The children are thriving, their relationships with their father slowly, carefully rebuilding. They spend holidays with us separately, and we've managed a few awkward but civil joint birthday dinners. Emily is engaged to a wonderful young man, and she asked me with tears in her eyes to help her plan the wedding. I want it to feel like your kitchen, she said, warm and safe and full of good smells. Robert will walk her down the aisle, and I will sit in the front row, my heart full for her, without a trace of bitterness for myself. As for Robert, our paths cross sparingly. He's still at the same firm, though I heard through the grapevine he didn't get the promotion he'd been hoping for. The scandal, however quiet, left a mark. He lives a quieter life. We exchange polite emails about the kids' insurance, or he'll drop off a package for Michael at my door. The last time I saw him, it was at the grocery store. We were both in the produce section, reaching for the same bunch of asparagus. Our hands didn't touch. He looked older, his shoulders a little more rounded. "Laura," he said, with a nod. "Robert?" A beat of silence, filled by the supermarket muzak and the rustle of lettuce. "You look well," he offered, and it didn't sound like a platitude. "I am," I said, and meant it. "I hope you are too." He gave a small, almost imperceptible sigh. "Getting there." He let me take the asparagus, and we pushed our carts in opposite directions. There was no sting, no lingering ache, just the recognition of two people who had shared a long journey, took a devastating detour, and were now navigating separate roads. The money, that initial $25,000 I secured, has grown. It's not a fortune, but it's a foundation. It allowed me to reduce my nursing hours, giving me time to volunteer more extensively at the shelter. We've even started a small financial literacy program named New Ledgers, where I teach women how to read bank statements, build credit, and secure their own futures. The first time I stood at the whiteboard, marker in hand, explaining the difference between a savings and a checking account, I felt a surge of purpose so strong it brought tears to my eyes. The circle was complete. The very tool of my betrayal had become an instrument of empowerment for me and for others. One of the women in my group recently asked me, "Weren't you scared? When you took that money, didn't you think it was wrong?" I thought about it, watching the afternoon light filter through the blinds, painting stripes on the floor. I was terrified, I admitted, but I realized there's a difference between revenge and restoration. Revenge is about hurting the other person. Restoration is about saving yourself. What I did was an act of preservation. It wasn't about taking his money. It was about securing my half of our shared life before it could all slip away into a lie. It was the first stitch in mending my future. I still have that faded mug my daughter made. I still drink my morning coffee from it. But now I also have a sleek new travel mug from my drives to the community center. Both hold my coffee. Both hold pieces of my story. One represents the love that was real, even if the vessel that held it was flawed. The other represents the journey forward, insulated, sturdy, and designed for the road ahead. So, what's the lesson in all of this? It's not that love is fragile, though it can be. It's that you are not. You are resilient. Betrayal, especially one woven through with financial deceit, can make you feel like a fool. It can make you feel small and worthless. But you have a right to your own story, to your own security, to your own peace. Sometimes justice isn't a courtroom verdict. It's the quiet click of a mouse transferring funds to a safe account. It's the strength to walk away from a dinner growing cold and towards a future you have the courage to build alone before you can ever build with someone else again. The final piece of this long story isn't about him. It's about me, sitting here now in my sage green house, the hum of the dishwasher a contented sound in the background. The scent of the lavender is coming through the window. My phone lights up with a text from John. "Thinking of you. Steaks tonight?" And another from Emily. "Found the perfect wedding venue pics. Can't wait to show you." I am here. I am whole. And I am, finally, free. And so, my dear friends, that is my story. Not a tale of spectacular revenge, but one of quiet reclamation. It was a path paved with shock, then pain, then a cold, clear resolve I never knew I possessed. I often think back to that version of myself, sitting at the scratched kitchen table, the rain misting the window, staring at a line item on a screen that unraveled my entire world. She was so afraid, but she was also so much stronger than she knew. I told you this story not to dwell on the bitterness of betrayal, though its taste is one I will never forget. I shared it to highlight the moment after, the moment you choose, the moment you decide you will not be a victim of someone else's secrets. You will be the author of your own next chapter. Was what I did with the money risky? Perhaps, but in that moment, it was the only lifeline I could throw to my future self. It wasn't an act of spite, it was an act of survival. It was the financial equivalent of putting on my own oxygen mask first before assisting others. And because I did, I could breathe, I could think, I could rebuild. Now, I turn this over to you. We all have our thresholds, our breaking points, and our moments of quiet courage. Have you ever discovered a truth hidden in plain sight, in a phone bill, a casual comment, a change in routine? Did you ever have to make a difficult, calculated decision to protect yourself, one that others might not understand? What does justice look like to you when trust has been shattered? I find great comfort in our shared stories, in knowing that none of us are truly alone in our heartaches or our triumphs. Your experiences, your thoughts, they matter. So if this story resonated with you, if it stirred a memory or a feeling, I invite you to share it in the comments below. Let's have a conversation built on empathy and strength. If you'd like to hear more stories of real life, of resilience in the face of betrayal, of finding light after the dark, please consider subscribing to this channel. Hit that like button if this reminded you of your own quiet power. And remember, no matter what you're facing, your next chapter is always yours to write. Thank you for listening. Truly.